Hello, everyone. If you are on Facebook, you may have recently seen a trend of people posting 10 albums that influence their taste. My friend Will from One Man's Tracks on YouTube did his take on this by creating a video instead of just posting a new album every day for 10 days. At the end of his video, he nominated me to do the same thing. So here I am giving you my 10 picks. I'm not going to follow the rule of not giving an explanation or any order. I have a lot of them in physical copy, or the ones that I don't have the physical copy of, I have something else to represent it here. So let's go through them. Number one is Fleetwood Mac's Rumours. This is my favorite album of all time, so there's no way I wasn't going to put it on my list. I listened to it a lot over the years, and I was first really introduced to it when I was in high school, around 17 years old. Once I got around to listening to the whole thing, though, I could see just like how relatable it is to anyone. Like everyone's been through a breakup or like had tension with friends. It's the whole album is just about those concepts because a lot of the members of the band were in relationships with each other and they were ending those relationships or married and getting divorced, but they all came together to create this album, which ended with it culminated in them creating the track The Chain, which is all about them coming together for something bigger than their personal relationships. My favorite track from the album, though, is Never Going Back Again. Lindsey Buckingham just on his own with an acoustic guitar. It's a great song. Number two is Queens of the Stone Age, Songs for the Deaf. I could have picked any album by Queens of the Stone Age. They're awesome. I listened to them a lot throughout all of middle school, high school, even elementary school. But this album has their song No One Knows, which is how I got introduced to them. That song was on the game NHL 2003, and every time it came on that game I got excited because I loved it. And then I started exploring their other music and found out that I really liked it. The whole album is very loud, everything is mixed right to the front. Josh Homme's got some great guitar in it, and his vocals are really good too. And Dave Grohl from Foo Fighters and Nirvana plays drums on this album. You can really tell it's him when you're listening to it. It just sounds like his style. The track is going to be No One Knows, though. Number three is Audioslave's debut album, Audioslave. I could have chosen any of their albums too. They're another one of my favorite bands from high school. They're probably who I listened to the most through high school. I really liked the band Rage Against the Machine before them, and I could have gone with them for this list too, but I prefer Audioslave because I liked the instrumentals in Rage Against the Machine, but I'm not too big on the rap rock that Zach De La Rocha does. So when I found out that they had a band with Chris Cornell, I was completely sold on them. Chris Cornell is probably my favorite rock singer of all time. And Audioslave, I'd put in like my top three bands of all time still to this day. Like I still listen to them a lot. I only chose this album over their other albums because I have a physical copy of it. I like all three of the albums they released equally. Opening track to that album felt like the perfect introduction to the band. And then like a Stone is just amazing writing. And my favorite track on the album is Shadow on the Sun. It's my favorite just because I did an analysis of it when I was in grade 11 for English. I had to analyze the lyrics of a song, and that's the one I chose. But it's a really good song. Number four is The Rise and Fall of Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars. This is the first one that I don't actually have a physical copy of, but I have the Best of Bowie CD, so I'll use that to represent it. And I'll also put a picture of the album somewhere in here. This album has the best name for an album. It's like a story in itself, but the album itself is also really good. This has a lot of his big hits: 5 Years, Moon Age Daydream, Ziggy Stardust, Starman, Suffragette Cities on this album too. It's really good. The whole album uses a sci-fi setting and the character of Ziggy Stardust to explore taboo subjects such as sexuality and like sexual orientation. My standout track from it is Starman. It's a glam rock song that pulls inspiration from The Wizard of Oz and Doctor Who, and it's kind of right up my alley. It has like acoustic guitars and it's just like fun, like very 70s sound to it. Number 5, we got Lou Bega, A Little Bit of Mambo. For most people, Lou Bega's only song is Mambo Number 5, but I've always been an advocate for the whole album. This album is full of just Latin pop, swing, mambo songs. I remember as a kid, we'd always have dance parties in my living room with my family. This was one of the main albums we listened to at the time. I definitely don't think that Lou Bega got enough recognition when this album came out, because I think there's a lot of tracks that are even better than Mambo Number 5 on it. And my standout track being Tricky Tricky. Number 6, Led Zeppelin, Houses of the Holy. Another one I don't have the actual physical copy for, but I think using Mothership works. I also have a few other of their compilation albums, because Led Zeppelin is my favorite, who I define as my favorite band of all time. I like their mix of folk, rock, blues, progressive rock, like all genres that I really like. They combine into one. I could have used any of their albums as well. I love all 9 of their albums that they released, the studio albums, I mean. I chose House of the Holy because even though it actually has my least favorite of their songs, all the rest of the tracks are towards the top end of what I would say are my favorite songs. Like, trying to choose a favorite off this album is not easy. The Ocean is probably my favorite hard rock song of theirs. I love the thumping bass in that. Over the Hills and Far Away, I don't think gets the recognition it deserves. Like, I think it could be held up right there with Stairway. The Rain song, I think, is just a beautiful ballad. I love the guitar by Jimmy Page in that. But I think the one that I'll choose as my standout is the psychedelic prog rock song No Quarter. I don't think John Paul Jones gets enough credit for his work on the keys. Obviously, he's one of the greatest bassists of all time, but he's also very good at playing piano. Number 7, Grateful Dead's American Beauty. I've already talked a lot about Grateful Dead in a previous post, and especially this album, because it was the one that got me into being a Deadhead. So I'm not going to go too in depth here, but I don't actually own a physical copy of American Beauty, so I just have another very best of CD. But this album's really great. It's really chill, nice to listen to, sit back, relax. And my standout track is the opening track to it, because I think it just sets the tone, and that's Box of Rain. Number 8, I'm going a little different on this one. It's Nobuo Uematsu's Final Fantasy VI soundtrack. I don't have Final Fantasy VI in a physical form, but I have Final Fantasy 15, which does have parts of the Final Fantasy VI soundtrack on it. I wanted to put a soundtrack in here somewhere because I normally listen to soundtracks while I'm writing my posts and doing work. So I had to decide between doing a film one or a video game one, and I decided, since I've talked a lot about film already and not that much about video games, I'd go with a video game one. And then from there I had to decide, do I want to choose the soundtrack from my favorite video game or my favorite soundtrack from a video game? And I went with the latter. And that's how I ended up with Final Fantasy VI for this. I could have chosen pretty much any of the Final Fantasy soundtracks, especially ones that are composed by Uematsu. He takes inspiration from progressive rock and a lot of Western musicians, especially Elton John. So he's like right up my alley. My favorite track from this is Celis. It's a beautiful song, but also Celis is my favorite character from the game. Number 9, The Beatles, or the White Album. Again, I don't have a physical copy, so I got this Beatles love set. It felt important to me to have something by the Beatles on here, and this probably my favorite album of theirs, so that's why I went with it. Really like how they went from like their biggest album with Sgt. Pepper, just like over the top extravagant, to this very like stripped down kind of folky album with the White Album. Most of the album is a Paul McCartney one, but they also allowed George Harrison to have a little more time here. He has 4 songs on the album, and he wrote and sings my favorite song off the whole album, While My Guitar Gently Weeps. For 10, we have Queen, A Night at the Opera. Again, I don't have a physical copy, but this Queen classic, which has quite a few of the songs off of that album. Like the year 2000 to 2011, like most of my school years. If you ask me who my favorite band was, the answer was going to be Queen. So if you ask me what my favorite song by them was, it was probably going to be Bohemian Rhapsody, which is on this album. This album was kind of my introduction to prog rock, even though I didn't really know what that was at the time. And obviously the standout track here is Bohemian Rhapsody, but to give another pick that stands out is the John Deacon written You're My Best Friend. Always really loved that song. It's a lot of fun and really happy. Thanks to Will for nominating me for this challenge. If you want to see album reviews, check out his channel, One Man's Tracks. I'll have a link in the description below. I'm not going to nominate anyone, but I do encourage people to discuss their favorite albums in the comments, or just let me know somewhere like what albums influenced them. That's mostly what this is about, not so much favorites, I guess. Hope you enjoyed that.